sifting through security news and a time when things got real. Hi, I'm Ken Ray, welcoming you into episode 200 of The Checklist, brought to you by SecureMac. It's just you and me on today's show. We will hit a bit more time for TikTok. In future, TV watches. Yeah. We'll also talk about something that happened to a friend of mine that kind of freaked me out. I think I have an idea that might have helped both of us, though. Find out what it is on this edition of The Checklist, brought to you by SecureMac. I don't want to get all artsy on you, but if there were smells associated with stories, this one would have hints of wet ink and an open bottle of whiteout nearby. That's because the stories keep changing, and they're bound to change again. TikTok and WeChat bans are on hold for now, though the TikTok hold could be for a very limited time. Now, both of these apps were actually supposed to be banned last week, though the SecureMac site says each got a reprieve. If you're wondering why they're being banned, you are not alone. According to the Trump administration, the apps pose a risk to national security because of who their parent companies are. TikTok is owned by ByteDance and WeChat is owned by Tencent. Both companies are based in China, and U.S. politicians argue that China's own security laws could one day be used to compel them to hand over data on American users to Beijing. So there's nothing anybody can point to exactly, just suspicion. For the record, I am not saying that that suspicion is unfounded. Still, you might expect evidence of wrongdoing before a national ban. So far, nobody has found that, unless you count TikTok accessing the iOS pasteboard earlier this summer. It's not doing that anymore, though, so it's hard to argue that that is the reason. TikTok's gone further to allay fears as well. The SecureMac article says that app has responded to international concerns by saying that it doesn't even store data for U.S. users in mainland China, and that it wouldn't give the government in Beijing access to such user data even if they requested it. Meanwhile, WeChat parent company Tencent has pushed back against allegations that it violates its users' privacy. Puts everybody in kind of a tough spot. I mean, you can't prove a negative. Not easily anyway. TikTok and Tencent say we don't, and somebody else says prove it. How are you supposed to prove you don't do a thing? The other thing people may wonder is whether the government can actually ban an app or apps. According to the report, existing U.S. law does make provision for federal authorities to intervene in transactions between citizens and foreign businesses when national security is at stake. The International Emergency Economic Powers Act allows the president to regulate international commerce during times of national emergency, provided that the emergency is brought about by an external threat to the U.S. Again, one might expect some sort of evidence of a national emergency, but, you know, fresh ink, whiteout, eraser shavings. Both WeChat and TikTok were supposed to be gone last week. But just before TikTok was set to become unavailable for download in the US, it was announced that Oracle and Walmart had come to an agreement to take over some of the app's operations in the US as a way of allaying the government's concerns. The compromise that the White House said it would agree to in principle. As a result, the removal of TikTok from the U.S. app marketplaces has been postponed until this Sunday, the 27th of September, pending the outcome of discussions over the agreement, which could still fall apart. If no agreement can be finalized in the coming week, TikTok will be removed from the App Store and the Google Play Store, and no further updates for the app will be available to existing users who already have it installed on their devices. So get TikTok while you can, right? No? I will confess, I did that a little over a week ago, thinking that it was leaving. I wanted to see what all the fuss was about, so I went ahead and downloaded it. So far, it is not as addictive for me as it is for other people I know. The thing is, for safety's sake, once it is banned, if it in fact is banned, probably shouldn't have it on our devices. Because if the apps can't be updated, any as yet unidentified security issues won't be fixed. If the TikTok and WeChat bans are implemented, this could have two major effects on user security. Any user who has a banned app installed won't be able to update it, according to the SecureMac blog. If the app is later found to have an exploitable vulnerability, there will be no way for US users to get the security patch, potentially exposing them to compromise. And everybody's going to know that you can't get updates, including bad guys, which leads to issue number 2. Any permanent ban will probably lead to hackers using social engineering hacks, using the lack of official updates as leverage. This may take the form of phishing links that offer phony updates for apps but actually link to malicious content. Or we may start to see fake TikTok or WeChat apps that are actually malware. In fact, we already have. Security researchers have already discovered one such fraudulent app calling itself TikTok Pro, which has no relation to the actual TikTok app and is in fact spyware for Android devices. Now, I'm focusing a lot here on TikTok for a couple of reasons. First, TikTok is a bigger thing here in the States, and second, WeChat's got a bit more leeway. U.S. Magistrate Judge Laurel Beeler has blocked the WeChat executive order in response to a lawsuit filed on behalf of WeChat users in the U.S., citing First Amendment concerns. The government says it plans to challenge the injunction in court. So WeChat's in limbo. TikTok's in sort of a high-speed limbo. If the apps get to stay, they'll be like the rest of the apps in the app stores. You'll need to keep an eye on your updates and watch for anything weird. If the bans do move forward, though, people with existing app installations should be aware of the risk that they're taking by using apps that can't be updated. And if they're banned, all users should be on the lookout for phishing attacks and scams related to TikTok or WeChat. I don't want to sound like an old timer, but here is how TV tracking used to work. You go to work Monday and ask the guy at the water cooler if he saw the game on Sunday. If he said no, or what game, you knew he was a communist. I'm kidding. Communist sympathizer. I'm still kidding. There was a time before cable, before digital, before over-the-top services. You know, back when we had rabbit ears and antennas on our televisions. Yeah, back in those times, TV tracking wasn't a thing. Unless you count surveys and diaries and focus groups. You probably know this, but in case you don't, those days are gone. Came across an article from the Mozilla Foundation this week. They've been investigating streaming ads during this election season, and if you listen to this show, you're probably not going to like what they found out. Talking politically, without talking politics, if you're watching a streaming service, not only are you getting pelted with political ads, those ads may be micro-targeted straight at you, and there may be nobody checking them for accuracy. According to the Mozilla Foundation, there are few federal laws regulating these ads, and almost no transparency into how platforms target them. As more and more Americans cut the cord, and with a watershed election looming, political advertising has become dangerously opaque. Becca Ricks, a researcher at Mozilla who led the investigation, says online political ads have enormous influence. They can micro-target, manipulate, and misinform voters at a level unmatched by any other form of political speech. Meanwhile, these ads are subject to almost no regulation and oversight, especially in the domain of streaming platforms. It's a worrying combination. Now, it's that micro-targeting thing that gets to me. Like the conversation we had a couple of weeks ago with Rob Walsh about listener tracking in podcasts. We think we're listening. It doesn't occur to us that we're being listened to, in a manner of speaking. We're watching TV. TV is watching us. And what really stinks is in some cases we're paying for that. Remember the old adage, if you're not paying for it, you're not the customer, you're the product? It's an old adage in internet time. It's also no longer true. Some of Mozilla's biggest findings: opacity, not transparency, is the status quo. Mozilla says none of the platforms they researched offered ad transparency libraries or archives except for YouTube TV. Roku says that it is planning to release an ad archive soon, but early details on that archive suggest barely any information will be provided. Also, the election is just a little bit over a month away. There is really not much soon left. Good policies, but unclear enforcement is another of Mozilla's findings. The foundation says most streaming platforms have strict policies to vet political ads, but those policies tend to be reactive. Many platforms have terms of service that prohibit specific behaviors, but there's no information about how the TOS is enforced in practice. For instance, Roku says that political advertisers are not allowed to run manipulated content or misleading messaging, but it's not clear how they identify and ban such advertisers. Now, there's a lot more to Mozilla's findings tied to political ads specifically. Platforms by broadcast TV networks have more mature policies, according to Mozilla. Loopholes are common. An ad that says "Vote John Doe" or "Defeat Jim Smith," those are identified as political ads right away. But the foundation says it's unclear how platforms treat other kinds of issue-based or otherwise political ads that are pervasive and influential during elections. All of this is super important. Here's the thing, though. All of this stays super important after election season. I know there's almost no such thing as after election season anymore, but seriously, TV's power to watch you, it's focused and it's ongoing. Under the heading "Targeting is highly sophisticated," Mozilla says most streaming platforms offer very complex ad targeting that is comparable to Facebook. Most platforms allow political advertisers to pull in third-party data, which means that viewers generally could be targeted with political ads based on household income, education level, marital status, causes they support, their political party affiliation, whether they are a registered voter, or whether they have cast their ballot already. Non-political advertisers have access to even more complex tools, including customer matching, inferred behaviors, and lookalike audiences. And it is worth noting, non-political advertisers advertise 24/7, 365. Mozilla tracked 6 streaming services for its report: Hulu, Roku, Tubi, CBS All Access, YouTube TV, and Sling TV. If you want to go in depth on each, or, just freak out about the state of the streaming world, we'll have a link to the full report in the notes for today's show. In a moment, a friend's harrowing tale and something that might have helped. But first, a word about MacScan 3 from SecureMac. Chances are you're doing more with your computer today than you were just a few months ago, thanks to all the staying in and social distancing, the working from home, the learning from home. I'm not saying you're doing anything risky with your computer. I will say, though, now would be a particularly bad time for anything to happen to your computer, which is why you need a good anti-malware solution like MacScan 3. MacScan 3 is a great defense against malicious software attacks aimed at your Mac. It's developed by SecureMac, trusted names in computer security and developers of exceptional security software for the Mac for over 20 years. MacScan 3 detects and removes Mac malware, catches keyloggers, removes tracking cookies, and provides full-range or targeted scanning, all without crowding up your hard drive or slowing down your machine. Sign up for a free 30-day trial today at SecureMac.com/MacScan. Then once you decide to buy for less. You can take a little off your subscription to MacScan 3 with offer code CHECKLIST. Try it first. Watch it kick those tracking cookies to the curb. Then when you're ready to buy for less with offer code CHECKLIST at SecureMac.com/MacScan. Got a message from a friend of mine the other day. It said, "So I fell for a phishing email this morning on my phone. They got my Apple ID. I only use it for Apple Music. I changed my password, canceled my credit card associated with the account, and removed all apps from my phone that were linked to the card. Is there anything else I need to do?" I replied immediately with Apple's advice. Apple says if you receive what you believe to be a phishing email purporting to be from Apple, please send it to reportphishing@apple.com. That's PHISH, reportphishing@apple.com. Company goes on to say that is a monitored email inbox which does not generate individual email replies. So I asked her to do that so that Apple could be aware and, heck, who knows, maybe take some sort of action on that email address or domain. At the very least, they might be able to keep it from happening to somebody else from that same address. Now, the other thing I did was reach out to the guys at SecureMac. After hearing what she had already done, they really only had a couple of suggestions. Nicholas Ramba said if any other accounts use that email address, there might have been password reset attempts, so that would be something to look out for. Nicholas Tachek agreed, saying password reuse would be the one thing that he'd be concerned about. And I will say that part hadn't occurred to me. And that made me feel sheepish. I'll grant you, security isn't what I do. I mean, I do this show, but I do a lot of shows. But I can't use my not being a security pro as an excuse for not thinking of that this time. And the reason I didn't think of that this time was because this happened to one of my oldest friends, somebody I've known since the 8th grade. And I went from talking about security stuff in the abstract to being freaked out for my friend. The good news is she was on it. She realized what she'd done in about 3 minutes after she'd done it. She had everything changed in 20 minutes. She seemed to have it under control. The one thing I was able to suggest, down the road thing, she needs to pay special attention to the charges on her card for the next little while. I mean, she had the card canceled really fast, so there probably won't be a problem, but she should keep an eye on it. Now, all that stuff is stuff that we have been over here countless times. And yet, happening to somebody I know, I won't say that adrenaline took over, but it did cloud my thinking. May I suggest you make a checklist? I don't mean listening to this show. I mean, that's great. I'm glad you're listening. We've done past episodes covering what to do in situations like the one my friend found herself in. I'm thinking I might need to actually make a physical checklist for myself. Because if I freaked out when it was happening to somebody else, how freaked out would I be if something like this happened to me? So, knowing the steps to take, maybe having them written down, a checklist that you can actually check stuff off, it might be a good way to go. Hey, if you're looking for more security news and how-tos, the place to look is SecureMac.com/checklist. There you'll find notes for this show. Heck, you will find notes for all 200 episodes of this show. Plus, I think there might have been an extra episode or two in there. Hunt them up for yourself. It all starts at one place, SecureMac.com/checklist. If you have a question you would like to ask or a topic you would like to hear us hit, our email address is checklist@securemac.com. That address again is checklist@securemac.com. And if you can't remember that, please do remember this. You're listening to The Checklist, brought to you by SecureMac. And we'll talk to you next week.